Right, my name is Charles Harra. In early the late years of the World War II, along about March or April, and the war was to end in May, I was returning from a mission over Germany. We had about 45 minutes to go before we would get to the English Channel in safety. We were in a tight formation. We always maintained a tight formation to discourage attempts by German fighters to close in on us. Not that this stopped them, but it gave them reason to be cautious and to give us a wide berth. The gunners were scanning the sky and reported seeing a B-17 flying at our same level, but about a half-mile away. There was no identification on the B-17 that they could see from that distance, but they determined that he was converging very slowly with our formation. Formation had about 1,200 aircraft in it from front to back, and for some reason it appeared that he was going to converge right where our formation was. We hadn't lost any aircraft that day and could not imagine why or how a B-17 could have arrived on the horizon going in almost the same direction we were. And as he got closer, we could see that there were no markings on the ship. The ship looked like it was brand new. It was shiny. There was no mud or burned, heat-burned places under the wing that could have represented heat escaping from the engines. There was no oil on the underside of the wing that we could get a glimpse of, and it just looked like it was too good to be true, that a ship in that condition could be going out of Germany at the same time we were. As it got closer to us, I could look through the windows on either side of the flight deck and was astonished to see that there was no pilot or co-pilot in that ship. In fact, there was no one aboard the ship at any of the windows that we could clearly see into the aircraft. It continued to push and converge on the three-plane formation that I was leading at the time. I had one plane on my left wing and one plane on my right wing. And as the intruder got closer, I physically had to move my three-ship formation out of the formation. I moved to the right, he was to our left. He flew right through the spot that I had been in. I had had some feeling when I saw him earlier that there was something special about that plane and myself individually. I couldn't imagine what it could possibly be, and I've never been able to determine that. But I moved out of the formation, my two wingmen followed me, and this plane went through the formation. He went under the plane that was flying right over me, and he went above the plane that was flying right under me, and we were stacked in pretty tight. He proceeded to remain as he was and had been on his same course that now took him off to the right side of our bomber stream. I had the navigator take a bearing on his path and tell me where he was headed for. And he got busy and did that, and said that it looked like he was going to fly north of Scotland and south of Iceland if he continued on that particular path, which he did until he was out of sight. We reported this to intelligence when we got back. They listened carefully, made their notes, and nothing was ever heard from them after that. Years later, in the year 2000, in fact, I was in Colorado at a location that was about 5,000 feet above sea level, and in an area right close to the what they call the 14,000 high mountains that are just run north and south, and they were just to our east or left, you might say. And the medical doctor that was leading our meeting was telling us about an incident that he had happen in which he was driving towards Mount Blanco, the southernmost mountain in this area, and with two other gentlemen in his rented vehicle, driving towards Mount Blanco, and he looked in his rear vision mirror, and here comes an airplane that was about 30-40 feet off the ground. When the plane got fairly close to them, he stopped the car, the three of them got out and watched as this turned out to be a Cessna 150 flew past them. It was described as I described this B-17. It looked like it was in showroom condition. There was no one aboard that ship either, and it was headed straight into the side of Mount Blanco, which was still about 2 miles away. It approached Mount Blanco. They expected to see it, if it stuck to its course, hit the mountain. It never did hit the mountain. There was no indication of dust. There was no explosion or noise from the ship crashing into the mountain, but there was no aircraft there when they got to the mountain. It had just been absorbed, you might say, by the mountain, left no track of itself at all. This took me back to my incident with the mysterious B-17, and the fellow that was driving that vehicle was our group leader that day, and he said that he has determined that one explanation for such an incident, he said, that is that the aliens, the UFO people, have the capability of making a saucer appear to be whatever they want it to appear to be. And he said quite lightly, it was a flying saucer that crossed my path, and either it was disguised as a B-17, which he thinks it may have been, because there are other instances of this sort of thing going on that I was unaware of. And but they could alternately, they could in effect hypnotize us, or could have sent messages to us that caused us to think that we were seeing a B-17 when one wasn't there at all. And he said other people had seen UFOs where the UFOs apparently hadn't seen or paid any attention to them. And they have seen the UFOs fly into the side of Mount Blanco, just as this Cessna 150 did, and without a dust puff being added or anything else. And if this is possible, they could be playing with our minds, they could be playing with our sight, they could be doing things that we have no idea can be done to us without our awareness. It was a very interesting incident that helped explain what I had seen years earlier, before the UFOs became sort of a table topic with everyone. And while we speak of UFOs, I might mention that I and my crew were in El Paso, Texas. On a Saturday night, we stopped to sleep over. Got up the next morning and saw in the paper where they were having a bullfight right across the state line in Mexico, Juarez. We decided that rather than continue on to MacDill Air Force Base where we were based, we all decided that we would go watch the bullfight. While at the fight, and there must have been 50,000 people in the bleachers there, all watching an active series of bullfights. And I noticed off to my right and just a little behind me, and at about what I estimated to be 3,000 or 4,000 feet, there were 5 what looked like big aluminum dishes that were almost stationary. And I say almost stationary is because they were wavering just a little bit, like maybe a boat would be in a choppy sea, where one side would come up and you'd put a little corrective action in it, and the other side would come up and you'd check that and so forth. And as it did this, the sun was being reflected off the bottom of the aluminum disc. And I said, no, wait a minute, the sun's up in the sky, it's not going to reflect sunlight from the bottom. So I watched more carefully, and it seemed like they were actually turning on a light that looked like it was a sunlight flash. But it was being emitted from whatever part of the ship had dipped down a little bit off the steady course that they wanted it and position that it wanted it to maintain. The bullfight at one time had everyone in the stadium looking at these 5 UFOs. Not knowing what they were, they went back to watching the bullfights, including my crew, but I continued to watch the UFOs. They were there for another 15 minutes. And all of a sudden, they began to move collectively as one, you might say. And I punched the whoever was sitting next to me, and I said, there they go. And they turned around and said, where? They had, before I could punch them and say, there they go, they had disappeared. That sighting has never been revealed, except I later heard in theory, we don't know, that they have lighting that is capable of supporting their ship. And when they have it in a position, they want to maintain that position, they can turn lights on to their right or to their left and cause the ship to move in that direction. I did not see any light emitted when they left. They simply began to disappear and go off in the distance more rapidly than I can imagine. But the theory that I later heard was that the light was a means of balancing their position where they were, and and they could regulate it by the amount of power that they put to the light. We'll perhaps never hear any more about that during my lifetime, but on the other hand, information is being released that could bring some of the answers. Thank you very much.